Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batz, and you are listening to episode number 2 of the Future is Bright podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with Lloyd Johnson, CEO of Chief Legal Officer. We discussed his 30-plus year career at the intersection of diversity in the legal profession. Lloyd is widely known as a convener of people, an organizer of legal executive events, and a publisher. Stay till the end to learn about what he's doing now and the special report he's releasing this fall, which we'll discuss in episode 3, since this is a 2-part series with Lloyd. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes and YouTube. A bit more about Lloyd. Prior to his current role and projects, Lloyd founded and was executive director for the Minority Corporate Counsel Association and Women In-House Counsel Leadership Association. He conducted numerous in-house counsel leadership development workshops and events. He was also publisher of the In-House Counsel Magazine, which sold to ALM, and created the Diversity and Bar magazine. Earlier in his career, Lloyd was in-house at IBM, Hewlett-Packard. He was also in private practice and also served as Deputy District Attorney for the City County of San Francisco. Lloyd received his bachelor's degree from the University of Southern California and his JD from the University of Southern California, Hastings College of Law. Welcome, Lloyd, to the Future is Bright podcast. It's great to have you on the show. Welcome, Lloyd, to the Future is Bright podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
I am excited to be here, and I don't know about our audience, but you and I are going to have fun.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm sure they will too. So, Lloyd, I am grateful because you're a busy man, and I've been wanting to get you on my podcast, which was the Law Firm Leadership One, for several years. And I'm just so grateful for making some time. I know we've got some exciting news to share with our audience. And so I will just come out and say, this is episode 1. There's going to be a second episode. So it's a 2-part series, and we're going to talk about your journey, your life, the gifts that you've given to the legal industry and so much that you've done, as well as we're going to talk about this report that you're going to be releasing and how important that is. And so let's go ahead and jump in and let's talk about your journey. So tell me about college. You went to undergrad and you did a degree, California schools, both. Tell us, just give us a quick back view on that.
So went to undergrad at USC, and it was an extraordinary experience in that one, I started out as a walk-on the track team and ended up being a school record holder, ranked 8th in the world, 8th in the United States and 16th in the world. But more importantly, I learned more about diversity in the summer of 1977 in Belfast, Ireland, in Bydgoszcz, Poland, than I have at any other point in my life. So it was clearly extraordinary experiences and wisdom that has carried me for about 4 decades.
That's amazing. So formative. And so noting and seeing you're an all-American track and field athlete, Olympics, was that part of the conversation?
Timing was bad. So I had my best year after the 1976 Olympics. And then in 1980, I was in law school. But even if it wasn't for timing, if you look at my times and you look at the times that people made the Olympics, it's a pipe dream. But I did get to run with some of the best. And that was really all that I ever wanted.
That's amazing. Do you maintain that lifestyle still? Do you enjoy still doing that?
No. In order to perform at the level that I did, it basically resulted in putting 100 miles a week on my knees for 9 months of the year. So my primary form of yoga is actually hot box yoga and walking.
So, well, such a pleasure again, and it's exciting to hear about that journey with you having such a formative experience that has painted your career. Why law school?
So, was born and raised in what is now wine country, a small town called Santa Rosa, and that our family had a janitorial business because at the time that's all that white people would allow Black people to do. And I had an uncle who was 15 or 16 years old, broke his ankle, and because he was hard-headed, he re-broke his ankle. And when he broke his ankle the second time, the anesthesiologist blew it and he died. And that none of the doctors would testify against one of their, and none of the lawyers in town would represent a Black family suing a white doctor. And my grandfather said, who raised me, at some point we are going to have a lawyer in our family, and I volunteered.
He said, "Me, please." So is that why you ended up landing in government originally as a deputy district attorney?
No. The reason that I worked in the DA's office is that I wanted to be a trial attorney. And that I was fortunate enough to, while I was in law school, clerk for a person who would have been the first Black Supreme Court justice, except for he was a bit of a firebrand, Clinton White, who was on the Court of Appeals. And he advised me and said that if you want to be a great trial attorney, you need to do three things. You need to learn how to wait tables, do sales, and work in the DA's office. So I did the Denny's thing in high school. And my first job out of law school was actually in sales at IBM. So I did all three of those things. And it was a good experience.
And so what led you, as I'm noticing here, led you into big tech? I mean, you ended up at Hewlett-Packard, which was a household name, I believe it was a household name, late 80s, as they were touching tech.
Yeah, well, that was my second big tech experience. To the extent that you consider IBM to be big tech. So my first job out of law school was actually at IBM. Okay. At the time, corporate running was really big in the US. So I actually sent my resume, which had nothing on it because I was in law school, but my running resume to the 5 companies that did best in the national championships, and within 90 days had offers. So I had an offer from IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Texas Instruments, and 2 small defense contractors. Wow.
And so why did you ultimately choose Hewlett? How was that formative for you to go in-house?
The general counsel at the time was a fellow runner, and he was a Mormon. And that there were just so many, for all of the reasons that you would think that we would never want to sit down and talk, were the reasons that we talked forever. And so it was just an opportunity to work for an extraordinary person. And, working at HP, that wasn't, as appealing. It was actually more appealing to my first wife than it was to me, because she looked at the stock price.
Yeah, right. So you being, a huge influence on a voice for minority attorneys in the United States, was even your experience in going to law school and going to the DA's office and going in-house at 2 tech companies and then doing private practice. What was that like for a Black man?
Well, point of correction. I think if you look at my body of work, it has been focused on more than just people of color. So, for instance, between 2010 and present, I've put on 100 plus workshops for high potential women, 80% of whom are white. 40 plus those women are general counsel in sitting companies. And that some of the things that I've been fortunate enough to launch have impacted all people in the legal industry, not just people of color.
Understood. And
but I'm sorry, but what was the first part of your question?
I just wanted to know about the formative experiences throughout your legal career that kind of landed you to what eventually was launching the Minority Corporate Counsel Association.
3 things. One, being a janitor, as I talked about, was about 11 or 12. And this one particular job that we had, I guess I made, this one particular young woman very upset. And so she went and wrote on the wall, Niggers are like flies. They eat shit and bother people. And that and seeing how my grandfather responded to it made me say, that's what I want to be. And I talked with him about that. And our family had, over the years, a number of houses burned down and businesses burned down. And I said to him, but why is it that you don't hate? And he says, because if I do, then we've lost. And so that he demonstrated to me that being able to talk to people who look at something differently than you and have a conversation in which you can hear each other. And so if you look at all of the things that I've created, I think that you will see that although the content that we create and has been created is valuable, it's really just to have a bridge, to have a conversation, and from that conversation to develop a relationship.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk about some of those foundings that you've done. So led the minority, founded the Minority Corporate Counsel Association. You also participated and were a part of Women in In-House Counsel Leadership Association. You started your own kind of consulting, coaching organization for corporate legal departments and law firms. What are some insights and some things you've learned along the way running these businesses?
In each decade, literally going back to the 80s, I've tried to look out and say, what are the 3 or 4 major business or other forces that are driving that industry? And one of the advantages for me of being Black and raised in an environment that was 99% white is I really got to know people, and I got the ability to make friends, especially with those who are ostensibly different. And so as I began to, in each one of those decades, I just get access to a lot of different people in literally all walks of life. And so, for instance, in the 80s, the idea of technology and, being able to impact things in different ways. So, if you look at 2 companies that I've worked with in that decade, IBM and HP, and that in 2000, I thought that one of the most significant areas in which there should be focus in the legal industry and specifically law departments was talent development. And so, over time, I've really, morphed and tried to do things to help accelerate that. So take a look out at the industry, talk to the people who have some insights that I don't, and then find one small area and then try to do some things to move the needle in that area.
And so the idea of generating content and running events, webinars and workshops, was this something that just felt natural and came to you? Was it something that you did maybe in college or prior years? I'm curious about like this ability for you to convene and bring people together and share insights.
So 2 things: the power to convene and then being able to create content. So true story, 1998. So I started MCCA in 96, 97. 1998, I literally said, you know what? MCCA needs a magazine. And okay, I got this idea about a magazine, which ultimately became Diversity in the Bar. But then I said, well, magazines are expensive. So who am I going to get to publish it? So I literally called up Bill Pollack, who was the CEO of American Lawyer Media at the time, and said, 1, you should publish our magazine, and 2, you should pay us $125,000. And he said, wow, you don't know the business, but I do like you. And so that American Lawyer Media became the publishing partner for Diversity in the Bar. And he said, Lloyd, you can be a great publisher. And when you decide to leave MCCA, and I don't think that you're going to be there forever, I would love for you to help us with Corporate Counsel Magazine. And so and I said, oh, wow, that's great. I don't know what a publisher is, but you seem to be a nice guy. And so, but it was great, Bill and Eric, and Eric Press, and some just extraordinarily bright people who knew how to write and who knew how to tell stories. They just let me be in the room with them. And so I learned a lot there. And then the power to convene really goes back to lessons that I learned from my grandfather. We were the third Black family to move to Sonoma County.
Oh, wow.
And so that he developed alliances and close friends with the Jewish community, just because there were more of them. And if you look really, really closely at the issues that impact people of the Jewish faith and issues that affect Black people, we actually have more in common than we have different. And so seeing him bring together different people, and the moral of the story is that your most complex problems are going to be solved by your relationships with people, not because you're smart. And I've just had that as the foundation. And I don't know that I'm the smartest person in the world, but I do know 6 people who are. And just bring them together, ask them one question, and quality attracts quality.
Lloyd, who or how, so this is a kind of a multi-part question, but who has inspired you to lead, or who has been heroes in your life? So part 1. And part 2, how have you developed, or where have you gone to get help to develop as a leader? Curriculum coaching, things like that.
Heroes, first, my grandfather, and then second, my grandmother. Some people will say that my superpower is my ability to listen and to get hyper focused on the person that I'm talking to, and being able to hear the pain of a Black woman in 1960 or 1970 has served me really, really well. I've just been extraordinarily fortunate. I was mentored by Vernon Jordan for a while. And everywhere that I've gone, there's something that I associate with some of my clients, and they're champion magnets. Wherever they go, people want to be their champion. And in every job that I've had, in every opportunity, so those are, a couple, those 3 people in particular, but it's the, other folks that have made a big difference. And then in terms of, the help, because I have done so many things with so many different angles, I'm really, really fortunate in that the universe consistently brings to me the people that I need in order to execute. And so, for instance, I've been able to do some, very significant things with the SEC over the course of the last 18 months. And that is driven by somebody who has followed my career for the last 20 years. And then in 2021 said, Lloyd, the SEC would like to work with you. And so now all of a sudden, I have an opportunity to work with Chair Gensler, and then have been exposed to his people and creating content around that. So get an idea, get the smart people in the room, make sure that you're focused on the idea and not the people, and that you have some adherence to some basic concepts about what you want to do, and realize, do it right, and you're eventually going to make money, but put the concept and the relationships first, and you will always, especially if you're in the legal profession, because premium dollars, everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah. Let's talk about chief legal executive. You've been doing this for 20 plus years.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things you're doing. So I'd love for you to give a quick overview to my audience, because when I started talking about it, I got it wrong. And I wanted to hear just your thorough explanation of what you're up to.
5 lines of business. One is events. So they can be as small as a reception of 30 or 40 Black in-house counsel or as large as conferences. Second line of business has to do with executive leadership. So this year we launched a year-long executive leadership program specifically for Black men and women. Third, consulting and executive coaching. Right now, I currently am an executive coach to 6 sitting general counsel in Fortune 500 companies and about another total of 12 people. But I spend less than 10% of my time executive coaching. And then fourth, and something that I'm really, really excited about is an online platform called Outside Counsel Search, which will allow in-house counsel to search for outside counsel based upon race, industry, practice area, and location of the matter. And then fifth and finally is selling subscription services to and licensing to different parts of our content.
Let's talk a little bit more about this outside counsel search. How is this serving the addressable market in your clients?
Well, generally, the process of finding a lawyer is highly inefficient and has not changed since the beginning of time. And that to be able to find in 5 clicks what you otherwise have to make 10 phone calls just makes some inherent sense. And so in less than a year of having the platform online, we have 64 law departments that pay a pretty healthy annual subscription fee. We currently have 503 partners of color. And then there is a adjacent line of business that we have, which is called Elevating Black Excellence. We are now about to have our 5th event. It's a 1-day virtual conference, 21 sessions, CLE credit. All of the topics relate to substantive law. We've started with 332 companies that participated in the first event. We're now at 407 companies, which I think is about a 23% year over year increase, and average attendance is 92 people per session. So if you know anything about conferences, most conferences you'll have 45 people to 50 in a room. So we can actually offer sponsoring law firms twice the audience that they get at half the money without any expenses of having to get to and from there. So if you look at it, it's literally one of the most cost-effective investments for business development in the industry.
That's amazing. That's exciting. Let's pivot. So let's talk about this research project.
Yes.
So I know you're very excited about it. I know you got a big launch coming up. So what you had shared with me, and I'll have you elaborate, is that you were the first ever to do a DE&I law department research project more than 20 years ago during 1999 and 2000. And you're launching another one right now. So 20 plus years later, how is that different is the big question that we need to address or you want to talk about. So you have this roadmap to inclusion. I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you. So in 1999, 2000, some of the things that we did right is we reached out to law departments and asked them about what's working. What we didn't do is we didn't socialize our research. And so there was no gathering for people to begin to talk about it. And another thing that we didn't do is the conversation was, what are you doing right? Not where are you struggling? And so in this instance, so of the 27 companies who are involved in the research, all of the interviews are under the veil of anonymity. So the research will really say these are 5 GCs who are doing extraordinary things. These are some of the specific tactics and some of the specific strategies. And here is in each one of these 5 areas, 3 or 4 challenges. And then here are some counter strategies to get through that. And then finally, we're going to have a series of 5 workshops around the country in which we'll bring together 40 to 50 companies in each one of those regions to make that research real and live.
That's so extraordinary. So, but all this is coming up really soon, like
Yes.
September.
Yes, September the 3rd, the 13th in Chicago. But our big show, unlike any other place, and there's no place like New York. So
No.
September the 14th, that's probably as close as I'll get to Broadway in my career.
So, so Lloyd, how can people find out more information about that?
www.chieflegalexecutive.com and or reaching out to me at lloydj@chieflegalexec.com.
Fantastic. And friends, all of you who are listening, so again, this is part 1 of a part 2 series. Part 2 that we're going to release after this is I'm going to have a conversation with Lloyd, and we're going to jump into this report that he just described. So definitely stay tuned and look for that next episode as Lloyd elaborates on some of the findings that are so critical. So Lloyd, a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What makes you laugh out loud?
Silly stuff.
Very, very candid and apropos. Okay. Care to elaborate?
For the people who will say that I am creative and I've been able to innovate, that's the cute part. What you don't see is, unless you're funded properly, that you always are trying to raise money. And so you have to spend it before you make it. So there's just, in what I do, there's just an inherent amount of pressure. And so therefore, to be able to find things to do to help minimize that pressure. One is laughter, and then the other is just perspective. There are a lot of really, really bad things going on in this world. But what we're doing is not rocket science, and it's certainly not life or death. So to be able to keep perspective and laugh is a critical part of my well-being.
Thank you. Another question. Where have you broken the rules?
I'm not sure that I have. I think I've done things that haven't been done before, but with respect to this report card, that is the single most innovative thing that I have done in 41 years. And it will break the rules because, as far as I know, I can't think of that many instances in corporate America in which you've had Black people say to leaders in leadership, this is how we grade you. So that's breaking the rules.
And Lloyd, how can people find you, contact you, follow you on social media? What's the best methods do you want to suggest for everybody?
My director of social media would say that we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, I think everything except for Facebook, but just Lloyd M. Johnson Jr. Lloyd Johnson actually is a gentleman who owns a series of nudist camp. So please put the M in there.
Oh, they'll get a nice surprise.
That's true. Which actually came up in the job interview, because prior to that, I didn't use the M or the junior. I'm not that official or officious.
So, Lloyd, it's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for your time today for this first episode.
Thanks. Can't wait for part 2.
Fantastic.